Hello, everyone. Hope all of you are well today. Welcome to the Quarantine Collective's ongoing reading of Nietzsche, The Eternal Return by Klossowski. I was up super late last night, and also I haven't been feeling well. So if I'm a little slow today, give me a little bit of grace. We'll see what we can do, but I'm not terribly worried. The fun part about this book is that it kind of reads itself, and it does a phenomenal job of it. And I don't have to spend too large of a time doing a great deal of explanation. So, pretty jazzed about that, actually, to be frank. We're really deep into chapter 3, and I'm going to do my best to sort of bring us back to where we are now, so that way we can continue the reading, because it is its own deal, and it's not a thing that really should be broken up. So I do recommend, or ask, or beg might be the best operative word there. Please read this book, because it's as you go through it, as you make your way through, as you progress, it is intended to be read sort of all at once. It is intended to be taken in as you do and as you will. Klossowski's prose is unique. There are a few writers like him, so oh, I left the music running. I am terrible. Thank you for letting me know, YouTube. Yeah, it's I was just begging people to read the book because it's that good. So the core thing we've run into at this point is, as we're building up what the circle is, what the eternal return really means, what the effect of it is, how it comes about, what it does to us, what it does to blah, 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 blah. The core claim being made at this point is that reality that is experienced, reality, the real world, we experience the real world directly. But what we experience is this single continuous circuit of intensities that locally stabilizes into signs, subjects, and objects. These stabilizations are necessary for the process of this, but it is secondary. These are effects that misrecognize their own origins as intensive. So we have sort of two poles of existence because of this. We have what we would call everyday life, which is everyday life. We all have that. It's just the going about our day. Variable intensities sit here. There are sign functions that stabilize the fluxion, that the signs of everyday life that we sort of speak with. These things stabilize the fluxion. When I say I, it appears and feels coherent as I do such a thing. It makes its way in that direction. It helps to stabilize and maintain stuff. Is the music still loud? God, hope not. How is Operation Inflation going? Good. Jordy got, we think assaulted. He got hit in the face with a megaphone by Sorry, Kid Not Ken. Got hit in the face with a megaphone by a former Senate candidate for the Republican Party. So it's going. In this world of everyday life, the inside-outside distinction, the me, everything else distinction, has a clarity to it. And because of all of these things, communication between people is possible. We have a coherent I, we have a stabilizing set of signs, we have a clear inside-outside idea, me, blah, 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 all that. Communication is possible here because of these things. When we reach these high moments of these peak intensities, this break in things, these moments, this high tonality of the soul, signs of everyday life depreciate and new signs emerge. I, as a thing itself, is not really there. It's just not really there. Fundamentally. The way that an intensity used to sort of be designating is now designated. We've moved towards an immanence of experience. The separation of inside and outside has collapsed. That wall separating them is completely gone. And here, communication doesn't operate the same way. Because of all of these exact reasons, communication will fail for the most part because we don't have the same, signs, systems. Signs now exist almost for themselves or within relation to this experience within this high tonality, not to the rest of everything. It's a very different setup. And so when we have these structures and when we have these setups, it starts to give us a different view of how things come to be, how we come to understand ourselves, the things that we're part of, the things we think, how we think, what we think, all of that stuff. That's kind of the jam there. So before I go forward, I just want to make sure everyone's kind of generally on that page. Maybe a little bit. No? Let me size down a little bit. It's like a giant Brooks head. That's no good. Does my camera move? It's like a giant Brooks head. That's no good. Doesn't work for people. Reddit says, Klossowski is saying, hey, Dexy, what's up, buddy? What's up? I am on right now. I know, you're giving a big goofy grin. All right, give me a hug. Go. You should go. We're doing it. You want to stay for the reading?
What reading?
I'm reading a book to people, and then we're talking about what's in it. But you have to be quiet. Can you do that? Okay. I guess we have a fan staying here and hanging out. Klossowski is saying you got to be better, different person when you take your spirit walk. He's saying you are a different person when you take your spirit walk, and that the way that this sort of happens reflects back on how we actually exist in our everyday lives, that everyday life or everyday signs paste over, cover up. I don't want to say hide, but sew things together differently to give us a different understanding of things. For example, the high tonality, these moments, because the signs are more self-referential, the ego that is in it is gone. There's no manifestation within sentences. Denotation doesn't work because you're not talking about a truth or a referent outside of it. These ideas begin circulating amongst themselves. This setup fundamentally means that since the signs are relating to themselves and there is no I, that's not a thing you can then communicate easily to another person or another, even if you're both experiencing it, because it's referring to itself. So is the other. So the ability for people to communicate in this, it disappears. But back in the realm of everyday signs, because we have a very different way of understanding things, because the referents become each other, because I have a stabilized I, which is allowing manifestation within any sort of proposition. These things enable that conversation to take place. And that's kind of, that's how I read. That's how I read it. That's how I'm reading it. And this next little bit, I really like. Hey, Dexter, is Violet okay?
Yeah.
All right, good. She is with Mom. She's with Heather. All right, good. So the eternal return is never to the same place. The Hohe must necessarily be changed. To return is not the same as having to have left. There is no place. Like I think that's part of the Hohe the highest tonality is that because there is no inside outside, the inside outside distinction's gone. There is no real place. That's not really a thing. There is no center to it. The center to it disappears because everything is referential to each other rather than to any specific thing that is centering it, which tends to be the case when an ego is talking inside of the sort of former thing I was talking about there. So it's about the shift between what our everyday life is and then this position of recognition, almost a meta recognition of everything that has come, everything that will be, everything that will return, but that this is part of that sort of abstraction process itself, that the very nature of how we are in our everyday lives gives rise to the possibility, gives rise to the potentiality of this moment. If you're going to be in here, I can't have you singing and making noises. You're a goober. Sorry, Dexter's right here, so you don't see him. He's off to the side making faces and noises. And then while we're there in this moment, everything becomes, as it is, self-referential or crossing itself rather than any particular sort of meaning beyond that. We'll just go back a little bit. He just says, something happens to my thought in this sign. It regards itself as dead, no longer my own. My thought enters into such a strict coherence with it that the invention of the sign, the circle, takes on the power of all thought. Does that mean that the thinking subject would lose its own identity in a coherent thought that would itself exclude identity? There's nothing here to distinguish the designating intensity from the designated intensity, the relation between that. All right, buddy. I'm gonna ask you. I know you're having fun. Can you head upstairs? Mom wants to take you to city play. Please go. Please. Or you can hang out, but you gotta be quiet. Can you do that? Can't hear myself think if you're yelling and doing stuff in the background. Thanks, buddy. The text-to-speech font size is too small. Yeah, I can fix that. Give me 2 seconds. Oh, it is tiny. What the fuck, Brooks? There, that should be better. That should be better. Oh, is it fucking up again? It might also be fucking up again. Yep. 2 seconds. It's been doing this a lot lately. I've submitted a bug because I can't figure out what's starting it, though. So that's not helpful. Two seconds. Apologies. Okay, here's hoping that fixed it. It did, good. In the Hohe there is no, in the high tonality, there's nothing here to distinguish designating from designated, which is part of the process of how intensities come to form meaning and drive meaning. And because of that, there is no way to reestablish coherence between self and the world. because the everyday signs no longer do that. The designating intensities versus designated doesn't operate the same way. This circuit brings me back to the code of everyday signs, then makes me depart again, leaving me at the mercy of the sign as soon as I try to explain to myself the event it represents. And this is this ongoing sort of change that is happening as you make your way to it, as you do these things. From Telos to more immediate connections, the gap between signifier signifies closed. Yes, but it's not really signifier signified. Klossowski's semiotics that we went through in the first section, the first part of this, where he really builds it out, is about the way that intensities come to recognize themselves. They split and then create a sort of sign of recognition of themselves in that. And so as these layer, we end up with intensities that are designated and intensities that are designating. And so it's about the intensities and their interplay for Klossowski, not so much that, layers and layers of semiotics. It's not really that at all. Everything happens a lot quickly, a lot more quickly, and a lot more in that immediate synthesis of reality as it's being created. So it's a different setup in that direction. Yeah, this local vocal subtitles are fucking up again. I don't know why. I want to get fixed before I start reading, though, or I'll be turning them off in 2 seconds. So let me see if I can get this running. 2 seconds, everyone. Sorry. I'm going to move it to CPU, see if that works. We'll see if that works. Because it's, I don't know why. NVIDIA drivers have been having a lot of issues lately. But I have a couple extra CPUs, so we'll send that to it. This is how I'd phrase it at this point, I think. We can go back a little bit and chat a little bit if everyone wants to go back over stuff. I'm kind of happy to. I'm always happy to talk about this book kind of forever, to be perfectly frank. But the play he's making here, and it's again, as we lead into the next few paragraphs, it's kind of really, really important to sort of go over, because contemporaneous to Klossowski, this is Deleuze is doing his jam, Lacan has done his and is continuing to. There's a mystic sort of a system that's sort of emerging. Phenomenology is big, and Klossowski's going really far out of his way to, I feel like he's going far out of his way to really talk about all of the different parts of these different systems, and then show his own version of it to distinguish what he's doing from how other people are considering these things. Like the way that he's talking, for example, about Lacan. For Lacan, we have a master signification, a master signifier, which is a single signifier that sort of is an anchor for meaning. I'm simplifying, but that's kind of the setup. But for him, there isn't that. There is no master signifier. In fact, the sign of self isn't that, and doesn't even touch that in the same way. There's no top down. Instead, everything is emergent from the intensities. It's an excessively materialist version of this. Again, the intensities are not some woo-woo, oh, you feel, that's feelings and intensity. Not really what we're talking about here. That's post-person. We're talking about the vibrations, the oscillations, the shifting in the way that the very way of the world is sort of emerging. The wave functions of everything are coming back into creating you. It's not just a structure that is built in consciousness. It is the way that the intensive really produces consciousness as effect directly. That's like really what he just went through. As if I were to simplify, I might be oversimplifying. but it's a lot. It's right. It's signs which are products of flexion. Have the ability to not just point at flexion. Like that's the idea is we have intensities that produce signs. These signs refer back to these intensities, but can we use signs to point beyond signs, to point beyond intensities? Can we appropriate things that actually exclude appropriation? Can we think things that destroy the thinker? These are paradoxical statements in itself, and he's laying out an ontology and a system that is absolutely, to me, answering that. And as one comes back around, and makes their way through it, and we're just going to charge ahead, we're going to get to the reading. The way that our ego exists with this starts becoming clearly centered to it. It's this paragraph is kind of the crux. It's I may have read it last week. I don't think I read it last week because I think it's going to take us some time to sort of talk through. If I had to guess, it's going to be taking us some time to talk through. But there's a lot of things that are going to be happening here. As you read it with me, and please do read it as we go, or hear my thoughts in your head as you read it, whatever it is. The incoherence of what he's stating is intended to be performative of the thing he's stating. For if, in this ineffable moment, I hear myself say, you are returning to this moment. You have already returned to it. You will return to it innumerable times. No matter how coherent this proposition may seem to be in terms of the sign of the circle from which it is derived, for it is itself this very proposition. As an actual self in this context of everyday signs, I myself fall into incoherence. And this is a double manner in relation to the coherence of this thought itself and in relation to the code of everyday signs. According to the latter, I can only will myself once and for all, and it is on this basis that all my designations and their communicable meaning are constituted. But to re-will myself one more time indicates that nothing ever succeeds in getting constituted in a single meaning once and for all. The circle opens me to inanity and encloses me in the following alternative. Either everything returns because nothing has ever had any meaning whatsoever, or else nothing has ever had a meaning except through the return of all things, without beginning or end. When he says circle, it's he's capitalized for a reason. We're talking about the vicious circle. We're talking about the eternal return. When we speak of it, when we talk of this moment, when we talk of the circle or the understanding of it, in this ineffable moment, I hear myself say, you are returning to this moment. You have already returned to it. You will return to it innumerable times. I could talk about this fucking sentence probably for 2 hours. The ineffable moment is this instant where the eternal return becomes or is lived experience. This is not an abstract doctrine. So in this ineffable moment where the circle is experience, where it is what you're going through, you end up in this weird place. We end up with these 3 bits to this sort of formula. And what they're doing and what Klossowski's writing about is that these things collapse what we would normally call linear causal temporality, because these things happen simultaneously. They enact the confusion he's describing, the incoherence that he's actually going through in this paragraph. I hear myself say, is the split beginning, right? This is the moment that ego, I hear myself say, is not, he's being very upfront. Like this is, the split's happening. The ego has already broken. The speaker and listener are not the same thing, but they are within one consciousness. How is this? This is incoherent. This is insane. This is this self-division of the ego, but it's central to how intensity produces signs. I hear myself say, you, like intensities before you that produced you, are splitting, hearing yourself say, recognizing that thing. This is in Nietzsche's writings about his experience at Silmarie. This is what he wrote about. But it's not a biological event or biographical event here. This is an ontological event and structure. The voice that is speaking the eternal return is not located in normal time and temporal succession. It speaks from nowhere, and I don't mean like a void. I mean just nowhere, and outside of time, but addresses itself as an empirical thing that is embedded in time. I hear myself say, "You're returning to this moment. You are returning to this moment." And no matter how coherent this proposition may seem to be in terms of the sign of the circle from which it is derived, for it is itself this very proposition, as an actual self. You know what? Actually, I may stop there. We're going to stop. I'm going to break this sentence up. No matter how coherent this proposition may seem to be in terms of the sign of the circle from which it is derived, for it is itself this very proposition. The eternal return isn't just about circular return. That would be a mistake. It is the return itself. It exemplifies its own structure. The eternal return isn't about circular return. It is circular return. It is self-referentially distinguishing itself from others who have read eternal return as this cosmological hypothesis or ethical imperative or a comment on things. No, he's saying that's not what Nietzsche was doing here. Nietzsche was describing the experience itself. He isn't talking about some other cosmological function. He's not being cool with an analogy. It is its own thing that it is speaking through its own performative enactment. Then he adds, so no matter how coherent this proposition may seem to be in terms of the sign of the circle, it only operates, this coherence we just talked about, it only operates within a particular framework of semiotics. It's consistent to itself, but it is existentially particular, I might say, right? The proposition itself drives itself. It creates a circular justification for itself. And that's the point for Klossowski, right? This is a generative incoherence for this. This isn't a vicious circle as like a joke or whatever. This is a generative incoherence. Rudd says, when you remember a thing, memory is both when you experienced it every time you've remembered and reliving it at this moment you're experiencing. Yes, you are not outside of your memories. You're not outside of your thought. This is this related to Deleuze's univocity, Mr. Gogi? Yeah, I think. I read a lot of this. I think Klossowski and Deleuze are way overlapping. But one of the things Deleuze talks about, there's this a great video on Deleuze's system of thought and how he considers thought. And for him, the way thought works is we're not like a thinking creature that exists outside of time and space. Thought is a thing that is reactive and part of the very constitutive reality of the world. That's this. We are part of that same production process. And this generative system that we're talking about is yes, a circular justification that is its odd thing. But that's the point, actually, that we're experiencing it as that thing. And that's, I'll continue now. We're experiencing it as an actual self. In the context of everyday signs, I myself fall into incoherence. And this is like the crux of this. We have two incompatible sign systems coming together, and they meet inside of a single consciousness, right? Actual self, an actual self in the context of everyday signs, that's the empirical ego that you have that's through the codes of life. Me, Brooks. Hello, I'm Brooks. How are you doing? I'm maintaining all of this through social recognition, my own recognition of my social realities, how you guys are doing, all that fun stuff. It's good to hear from you too, Mr. Green. I'm sorry things are rough. It's been weird. It's a weird time. It's going to get weirder, I'm sorry to say. It's been rough for a lot of people. These everyday signs and the actual self that is part of this is the communication infrastructure of normal life. It's the one we're taking advantage of right now. You are hearing me say things. You can ask me questions. You can type things in chat like Rudd is, even if it's stuff I don't necessarily repeat, but I'm reading it. I'm going, like, this is communication that's there. It's the infrastructure of everyday life. Names, roles, commitments, narrative continuity of existence. This is an actual self in the context of everyday signs. As that, I myself fall into incoherence. The reflexive construction here is about emphasizing the dissolution of that agency. This is not a cognitive error correctable through better reasoning. That's not the setup here. Incoherence we tend to think of as something we can reason our way through. Oh, it's incoherent. Well, let me figure it out. I'll solve this puzzle. I'm very, very smart. That's not the thing that works here. This is a structural breakdown because intensive experience, the eternal return, the high tonality, the most intensive experience there is, confronts extensive organization, which is your social identity, some everyday signs, codes, blah, blah, blah. And the fall into incoherence here is kind of him prepping for what's coming very quickly, that identity as a thing is incoherent. Like, we maintain identity, as we've talked about. I think he said it pretty clearly so far, but he's going to really get into it. Identity in everyday signs exists and is stabilized through the suppression of these intensities. That the intensities are excessively powerful. The code of everyday signs, the system of everyday signs, continues to push them down, hold them down, all of that fun stuff. Pushes them in that direction. That's probably what I'd be. It is Nietzsche goes through this beyond good and evil. I have marked down verse 16. I as the grammatic habit. And he carries this through. It talks about this, like, grammatic habit by, like, oh, we say I all the time, and so I becomes habitual, and I marks on us and kind of creates the subject that we understand ourselves to be, the habit, the repeating habit. It's almost a chant to stave off insanity. That these pressures exist in that way. If you're looking for more Klossowski to go deeper into this particular thing, his work on Sod is insane, and does exactly this. It's what Deleuze I think Deleuze was excessively inspired by when he started also writing about Sod and how institutional codes work and how agreements work and these kinds of things. Really, really great. I think. Organelles writes, all of a sudden, all the noise of the everyday signs quiets. You see from behind and realize how those signs are everything most of the time, but are nothing at the same time. Yeah. The paradox is like emboldened and gets to live because the intensities that are being, in the high tonality, the intensities that normally are being sort of stamped out, that are conflicting because the world is chaos. The world is insanity. The world is absurdity. But we push it down, stamp it over with all these signs. And so in these moments, we get to actually enjoy that paradox. I mean, you can enjoy it. I do. I think it's an amazing. Allowing incoherent thoughts to exist is beautiful. There's a reason that the tradition in Eastern mysticism of a Taoist or Buddhist idea of the Zen koan, which are questions that are not meant to be answered or cannot be answered. I think my favorite thing I've come across the last few days is, it's a long story, but there's this terrible book that goes through and talks about how he understands the sound of one hand clapping. Oh, I figured out what the answer is. And he goes through this long answer, and it's like, it's embarrassing because he's trying to give, that's what he's doing, is he's crushing the intensities again by taking the paradoxical that is intended to survive as paradoxical and turning it into a rationalist understanding. So that way, oh, isn't it great? We can understand things again. Oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. Is this related to Nietzsche's Critique of Descartes? I mean, this entire paragraph is eat shit, Descartes. Like, I think Red actually put that in already, like laughing about how this is him taking on Descartes straight up. And this is Klossowski taking on Descartes as well. But yeah, Nietzsche was not a fan of the idea of I think, therefore I am. There's a lot of problems with that statement in and of itself, to say the least. But Nietzsche was not a fan, and I'm not either. So works out. Klossowski definitely too. But to continue. And this, what we just read, and this is a double manner in relation to the coherence of this thought itself and in relation to the code of everyday signs. So there's not just one incoherence, because that would be too easy. This is how I read this. I read this as him talking through sort of two incoherences, right? Because he's not being redundant as he says this. These are two very particularly phrased things. This double manner, this double incoherency, right? But they're their own things. The first is the internal incoherence, and the second is external incoherence. That's the phrasing he's sort of talking about here, in relation to the coherence of this thought itself, in relation to the code of everyday signs. So there's internal incoherence is the first. It's in relation to the coherence of thought itself. The eternal return as thought, the way that it functions, the way that the circle functions, destabilizes itself. It is not a positive feedback loop, or we may call it that actually. It's not a stabilizing loop, I probably should say. It doesn't right itself or ossify itself as it goes, because thinking it enacts the dissolution it describes, right? So if you think I return infinitely, I just thinking about that, just enjoy that thought for a moment. In doing so is already experiencing the I as not the same as yourself, or the I with itself. Your past selves, your present self, and your future selves are all in that different entities. And the only thing they share is the experience of that return. So it's not really an intelligible thought in and of itself. It doesn't work that way. So it is internally incoherent. But on top of that, it is externally incoherent because it contradicts every sign system that exists, because those require stable reference. Dog. You know what dog means? There you go. Great. It's that. Its communication is dependent on a consistent identity. If I say Brooks or I, there we go. I say, I promise. The I promising to you, as you hear it, has to be the same I who will fulfill the promise. I promise. And if it's a different me tomorrow, that's a problem for promising, right? Because that continuity, the eternal return dissolves that. It makes social meaning effectively impossible. So there's no external coherence either. And so as this happens, you might be like, well, I mean, if you're following, you're not going to be all like, well, this is just destructive. No, it's actually not negative. This is a productive incoherence. The incoherence, or how it happens to find a way to cohere, reveals coherence itself works differently on different registers of the system of semiotics Klossowski's put together here. Right? The internal, the external, these things operate differently. The world operates differently. The reveal of the eternal return here is actually incredible. This incoherence actually reveals its odd coherence, because it shows that this shit works differently across registers. Ralderble says, quote, "No one is anyone. One single immortal man is all men. Like Cornelius Agrippa, I am God, I am hero, I am philosopher, I am demon, I am world," which is a tedious way of saying I do not exist. I like good quotes. I need to save good quotes. That'll probably get penned. You know what? I'm going to fucking pen that. I'm a fan of that. Borges is good shit. Yep, penned. Borges is good shit. That's Borges, I believe. Is it Borges? I'm American and I don't pronounce anything correctly. Borges. I keep realizing I don't think I've heard a lot of people say these words out loud. Luis Borges. I thought it was Borges. It's a tedious way of saying I don't exist. God damn, what a fucking great... Man, when someone knows how to write, it's upsetting. It's like, God damn, that's just such a good way to end that sentence. So we'll continue. There's no S. Borges. It's Borges? Fuck. Well, so I learn something every day. Let me see if I can Google that. Pronounce Borges for me. Look at all these AI channels now doing the how to pronounce. I'm sure I trust an AI to do it very well. And that's like, I like the first thing I click on is how to pronounce, and it's like a comment war of people disagreeing, and literally the votes are split down the middle. So I'm just going to say, everyone knows who I mean if I say Luis Borges. And so I'm going to say that, and I'm going to be okay with people calling me a dumbass later. Borges. Wow, that makes me even angrier. That's another. No, not Jimbo says, so it'd be more suitable to say it thinks rather than I think. No, not yet. Because, see, what you're doing is the mistake. The mistake is to think you're outside of this. You are these thoughts. You are this. So yes, I think is perfectly fine. But it's understanding how these things follow, how these things come together, and that I isn't the stability. The I is used to basically sew up and ravel. But again, I would, if you start saying it thinks, you're distancing yourself from yourself, which is definitely not the point, because you are your thoughts. Oh, now Ralderble's like, I think Borges is, it's going to be. Allowance for phonemes we don't use in English. I give no allowance for phonemes we don't use in English. Have you not heard me try to pronounce anything French? It's embarrassing. I give no room for that. Give no room for that. Okay, and not Jumbo. So follow, because the rest of this paragraph is going to go through that, because it's not about distancing yourself. Rudd says it's pronounced like GIF. You're such an asshole. That's a good asshole comment, by the way. But as we go through, just keep hearing it, because this is, as he's going and as we're talking about it, the double manner, the incoherence double, in relation to the coherence of this thought itself, in relation to the code of everyday signs, right? But he says, according to the latter, I can only will myself once and for all, and it is on this basis that all my designations and their communicable meaning are constituted. The latter, the relation to the code of everyday signs, how you use the word I, how people talk about when they say I promise or I will do a thing or whatever it is, right? I will myself once and for all, according to the latter. This is the foundational fiction of everyday identity. The autonomous subject choosing itself. That's for you. Establishing character through commitment to decisions. I will follow through on the things I say. I am a consistent person all the time. When I say I'm going to do something, I make sure I do it. I make sure I am saying I am this, I am that. Enjoy realizing that that's the foundation of all religious and conservative movements globally. It's a long story. But this is like the target of Nietzsche, because he also hates all the religious and social systems globally. The idea of the sovereign individual, the Cartesian subject who can make promises, genealogy 2.2, is in my notes. That is literally this, like the idea of bad conscience, the idea of memory, promising where resentment is formed foundationally, is this, the sovereign individual, right? And this sovereign individual requires this ridiculous historical apparatus of punishment, but also of memory formation. Not just punishing when you don't do the thing and you aren't that consistent person or that consistent ego, but also memory formation in the way we move forward, so that way we can construct the apparatus that makes the ego the center, right? And that says, it's on that basis. It is on this basis that all my designations, their communicable meanings, are constituted. That on that basis, this dependency exists now. The communicable meaning, the ability for us to have this communicable meaning across time, promises across time, character across time. These things, again, presume the same stable subject we just talked about. If I can't be counted on to remain Brooks, right, then linguistic exchange itself doesn't really work as a thing, not as we sort of use it now. If I sign a contract, if you say I'm going to watch Brooks on YouTube, I say, yeah, no, I'll be there. I'll be doing my Klossowski reading. These things become impossible on their face to sort of work this way, right? The code of everyday signs is not about this convenient convention. A lot of people confuse that. As a lot of thinkers think about that. It's just this convenient convention. We use these words, everyone else does, so that's why we use them. No, it's not that. It is scaffolding for shared world creation. It's scaffolding for shared world creation. And that's kind of like where this is starting to come out and where the rest of this paragraph is going to go. This is not where the eternal return adding some new information to a framework and adding another bit to the scaffolding, right? It destroys the scaffolding. And that's why we actually can't communicate this in the way of everyday codes. This is not a message in the code. This is not a thing that can be talked about in the code, using the code. It has to be explained, if we're going to talk about code, like a computer virus in the code, like something else that's sort of added on and built in. We'll get to that, but it's not something that just is like a Zen koan. Yes, you may be able to answer it. Good for you. It's my favorite thing It's my favorite. Is anytime people try to answer Zen koans is like genuinely, I just find it enjoyable. Because they're just building more scaffolding, but the problem is that still sits there because it doesn't work that way. Paradoxes don't go away. You can't explain away a paradox. You can justify an explanation for a paradox, but the shakiness of that is just horrifying. Horrifying. He says, though, and he continues, because this is not the end of the paragraph. Sorry, I get too into this book. Apologies. I just have I've read it now. I think this will be my fourth time through it, if this reading itself. And that's just the English version. And I've read the French twice, with the English open, to be fair, and with my translation pen, and with the help of a handful of people. I can't get enough of this book. I just can't. Klossowski continues, but to re-will myself one more time indicates nothing ever succeeds in getting constituted in a single meaning once and for all. Okay. To re-will myself. Important distinction here, because he's used these phrases a lot in a lot of ways, but it's very specific. This is not, I will continue to, as I continue to will myself, or as I will myself again. No. It is to re-will. The previous will, the willed moment, has ended or been insufficient in some way. It's over. Like the re-willing. Every return to the circle requires it be reconstituted wholly. There is no choice or will that achieves permanence. There's no permanent decisions. There's no permanent will. Right? There is no stable subject. Nietzsche did a very good job, I think, making that point. Because it's not merely, a lot of people, you change over time, and so you're never really the same thing twice. It's like, no, that's like the junior version of it. There is no moment that the self achieves identity, ever. Because it must be re-willed. Nothing ever succeeds because of this in getting constituted in a single meaning. And this is like hardcore materialist semiotics. Like it's beautifully written sentence. Signs do not achieve a stable signification. They perpetually defer. They perpetually slide. They perpetually transform. The failure is not here contingent because better methods may succeed as blah, 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 and do this or that or this. We can figure something out. No. The form here, the setup here, the process that failure is necessary to it. To be constituted with this failure as such is necessary because the flux prevents any final crystallization. There is no stable self because everything is flux. So yeah, Rudd, the junior version is you're never the same river twice. The senior version, you never were the thing once. Yeah, it's a lot of great Zen koans that I could bring up in here and a lot of great lines. But yeah, that's it. You were never anything once. You're never you once. That's like the setup here. It's the failure is constitutive of existence. That crystallization is always simply not possible. There's no potential crystallized moment of total self. And it ends with that certain phrase. And there's a reason he does this. He's following in Nietzsche's sort of wording and footsteps, I think, here. But he ends by saying, nothing ever succeeds in getting constituted a single meaning once and for all. This is like mocking, Nietzsche does too, it's like mocking the idea of like the Platonic forms, the Cartesian idea, the Kantian transcendental structure, whatever it is. All of these things, once and for all, there is no permanence. Everything must be re-achieved, reconstituted, re-willed infinitely forever. This is not change. This is perpetual genesis without grounding. No grounding in any capacity here. And so there's a couple of phrases that are here. Again, it's going to come down to an interpretation thing. I'll read and then we'll talk about it. The circle opens me to inanity, encloses me in the following alternative. Either everything returns because nothing has ever had any meaning whatsoever, or else nothing has ever had a meaning except through the return of all things, without beginning or end. If there is a disjunctive moment, and I use that because I do marry a lot of this to Anti-Oedipus and a lot of Deleuze's work, flatly. If there is one, this is it. Inanity is an interesting word. It can mean foolish, but the reason it means foolish is because it means empty. It actually means empty. Over time, it came to be the inanity of a thing because it is empty, because there's nothing behind it, because there's nothing there. It's foolish to pursue. It's foolish to do. It's foolish to blah, blah, blah. That, whatever it may be, it's empty. This is not him saying it opens you up to foolishness. It opens you up to the emptiness of inanity. As I read, again, this is an interpretation thing. I think this is the direction of it for me. And the thing that happens is kind of the broken part. We have two, and again, the disjunction happens here. So it's going to be, you got a couple of readings. Like this is literally how we end up with our readings of Nietzsche. Like, as the circle opens, as it reveals this, as it exposes this and encloses at the same time, we end up with two paths, let's say, right? Following alternative. The first is, as he says, either everything returns because nothing ever had any meaning whatsoever, which is not a positive nihilistic meaning, but a traditionally nihilistic meaning. Everything returns because it has no meaning. The return is a consequence of meaninglessness. Things repeat because they lack any significance. This is Schopenhauer. This is Schope. I believe this is Schope. This is the eternal return almost as punishment or the curse of how we exist. Meaninglessness is in everything. Klossowski is going to be making a particular move here, and I kind of join, but that's the first alternative. The second alternative is that nothing ever had any meaning except through the return of everything. So the return is actually the ground of all meaning. It is the condition of meaning itself. There's no, teleological total meaning that exists, but the condition or ground of meaning is the return. That meaning emerges from the repetition of difference. Boy, I wonder if he knows a guy. Just wonder if he knows a guy, or maybe I'm too fucking deep in it. That's what he's talking about here. This is difference and repetition. Because the return of all things, the repetition with difference is where meaning emerges. It's foundational. It's not born of a negative. It's not that there's no meaning. It's that everything is what it is, and meaning emerges from this repetition with difference. It is an active positive nihilism that is transformed into a fully affirmative way of looking at things. I read it this way because to me, Zarathustra reads it this way. This is his redemption. This is meaning recreated and built through consistent recurrence of the eternal return. The return itself produces meaning. It doesn't confirm the absence of it. But you can't separate these two. That's the point for Klossowski here. Both of these things are operating at once. It is a nihilist affirmative system. And you can break, it's disjunctive, right? And this reconstitution that constantly is coming back, it can be that you see it as this perpetual reconstitution of things that's building meaning, which is an affirmative, a positive view of things. But also, it reveals that there is no ground, no transcendent ground, certainly. And that's a nihilistic view. That the alternative is undecidable, because both of these things are true together. They're true together. You can't break them off. This isn't the reason a lot of Nietzsche readings go bad is because they pick one. They don't see in it, for me, they don't see that these things actually come together. The whole point of this, is that. Because it ends with that phrase, either everything returns because nothing has ever had any meaning whatsoever, or else nothing has ever had a meaning except through the return of all things, without beginning or end. This isn't a teleological claim. I don't think you could state it more strongly. There's no origin that provides meaning, which is no telos to justify how we exist or what exists. There's no ending or goal. It's only middle. It is only return. It is only the repetition of the internal difference of intensity. Reed says, can we dig into what is meant by meaning a bit? This seems like an analytical first approach. Well, I would hope not, but it's possible. I'm still searching for an object that is meaning, but maybe I'm misunderstanding. Well, yeah, that's probably fair. I'm trying to figure out where the book has done a lot of building to this point. And so it's a little bit, so for Klossowski, and I'm trying to summarize without literally just going back and rereading most of this book at this point. Klossowski's completely abolished all semiotic structures that we may understand or systems. He's very much started from scratch. And because of that, meaning doesn't mean semantic content. This is not an abstract significance in things. Meaning is the stability of reference that allows signs to consistently pick out the same entity over time. Meaning is temporal coherence that allows or produces identity, predication, and communication, and enables those to be possible. There's a reason he's going in a very different direction from this, because he's exceptionally skeptical of any sort of pre-existing anything. Klossowski is basically, if it doesn't involve emergence, he ain't there. He ain't there. And so because of that, it's, hey, we have the world of waveforms exists. I'm oversimplifying because, again, trying to summarize a lot read here. So apologies. But the waveforms as they go, the intensities, as he calls them, the intensities of the waves, the interaction, the oscillation of these things, as they interact, as they collide with each other, as they cancel each other out, we have these weird fields of particularity, which are, if you've ever seen, like, I mean, we talked about waves, I want to say 5 or 6 readings ago now. Nietzsche was a big fan of waves. In his wordings, waves, you and I are the same. Something like that, looking out over the ocean, because the wave in the ocean is not a thing. There isn't like a wave that we can like cut off and go, hey, I caught the wave and I put it here. Instead, it is actually just within the water itself. It isn't its own thing. It's an effect of interactions that are incredibly complex across most of the earth that's creating the strength of those waves, or the height, or the velocity, or the churn, or whatever it is of it. And those waves, as they go and as they collide, they create more, or they cancel each other out. And that just happens to sort of hit the edges of, Earth, but it's hitting the edge of the Earth, and it creates the foam it does, because again, the way that things exist, the way that these things collide, create sort of effects. So for Klossowski, the waves of intensities that we are made of don't just produce us or aren't coming together because of us. Instead, we are emergently created by them, because the waves, through a process of their own sort of interactions, end up becoming this code of everyday signs through historical and other processes. Sorry, it's a lot, Reed. Sorry, it's a lot.
No, yeah, I should probably go back and reread some of the stuff, because I'm sure it would help me get a better sense for what they're trying to do. My feeling here that so they have to come in starting with the sort of like transcendental necessity that the type of meaning that they're trying to talk about here already exists. Otherwise, they would not be able to write this in the first place, right? Like, they need some coherence in the world for them to take advantage of that coherence in the world to write, to think, and so on, right?
Yeah, the code of everyday signs. Yes.
And so coming into this, we know that the purely nihilistic response, like the naive nihilism, cannot be a correct assessment of this thing that we feel and know exists because we engage with it all the time, right? But we also can critique the naive interpretation of what meaning and signs are supposedly, this like more original, like essentialist perspective, right?
You might have to say that second part again for me. I'm sorry.
So the signs that we use, oftentimes the naive approach that like the Buddha critiques, for example, is the belief that anything has any essential nature that is eternal, or even that such a category might exist in the first place. And so basically the point being that we know meaning exists in some capacity, so we can reject the pure nihilism immediately, right? And then on the flip side, we also know that, things change, and any attempt to form ground usually finds that it is only on even playing field with people who are saying entirely contradictory things, right? So there's no way to narrow anything down to any singular interpretation. Here, give me a moment. I was going somewhere with this, but I'll have to remember. Right, that's right. So the reason why I said analytical first is because it feels as though the attempt here is to take um, these observations that can be sort of ascertained through a combination of intuition and some critique, and then is moving to create this dichotomy that either pure naive nihilism or something else, a sort of like argument from necessity. And this kind of uh, seems to be arguing that the only alternative to the naive nihilism is an argument from necessity that produces this object of the eternal return, basically turning this into an analytical, like, God of the philosophers, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see actually. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with the way that you're reasoning this out. It's not my read here, but I can see, yeah. So for me, he's saying something slightly different that, and I think in order to do this, we kind of have to go back. This is actually maybe worthwhile doing. The way that meaning is made in Klossowski's system, and again, all of this is ultimately like an excessively, maybe overwhelmingly genetic account of how meaning happens. So like, just to go through it, because it's going to be important to this, I think. So we start with the intensities that exist before signs, like the sort of setup that's there, because everyday codes, the system of everyday codes doesn't exist as a pre-given structure. These are elements that emerge from intensive fluctuations. They're not imposed on them. It's not the setup here. So the flux sets up and is going. Over time, there are traces of these fluxes that are stabilized would be the wrong word, but that happen or seem to be is probably going to be the thing. They sort of recognize themselves a little bit more. There's a fixed element here in some way. But to get to that point, the first thing that happens is that the reduction of the flux to fixed sign is an abbreviation of it. Klossowski, in another work, he talks about it here somewhat, but in another work, he really outlines how he sees what simulacra are, that the intensities exist, and from them we try to construct a way for us to communicate it to people. I'm oversimplifying drastically here, but what we're doing is by making that happen, we're actually abbreviating. These are simulacra of the image that the intensities are creating. We have the intensities coming together, they produce the image. We then try to replicate that image in some form of communication, which is the simulacra. It's a copy of the copy. So this abbreviation that exists, just to read from a little bit earlier, impulses create forms out of movements and gestures, which cannot be distinguished from the invention of signs, and stabilizes them through abbreviation. For in abbreviating them, the impulses, these signs reduce the impulses, apparently suspending their flux once and for all, apparently being the super important word there. And as this happens, so like an example would be I is a single stable referent. Anger is this complex affective pattern abbreviated into a single term. Language simplifies the flux into units that are manageable, right? Nietzsche talked about this, gay science a lot. Consciousness evolved ultimately for communication, which is about simplification and the diagram of things, the falsification of a diagram of the complex inner life. So that's like the first step. The second step is, and we went through this a lot, forgetting. Like forgetting is the deal. To just read. What then is forgetfulness? It is the occultation of the signs we use to designate groups of events that are being lived through or thought at a given moment. The afflux of another excitation at another moment, which absorbs all the available designations, while the rest of our general apparatus is put into abeyance. So, as these signs are formed, as these abbreviations come to exist, and they're born directly out of the intensities. As this happens, forgetfulness occurs not as an absence of memory, which we tend to think of it as, but instead it's an active suppression that enables coherence. So every intensive flux requires different signs. Like hunger and horniness and gooning and watching Rick and Morty and eating chicken nuggets or wanting that. These are all separate intensity groupings that we've named. These are all different, but these are intensive fluctuations that require different signs. When a new intensity arrives, previous signs are occluded. the occultation, the occlutation, a terrible word, but these things are pushed out of availability. So we have this really weird discontinuity that happens suddenly because now that stuff's not there anymore. And that discontinuity is what everyday codes conceal, because the words that we're using when I say, oh, I am hungry now, well, it's threading. We're threading ourselves through the next thing. It's I am now hungry versus what I was, which means I have a consistency that I've developed and thread through all of this. The discontinuity is concealed there. The self persists here through selective forgetting of these discontinuities. The moment we would realize it, it would dissolve the self. So we don't go with that. Then we have the third step, which is the demands of the gregarious, which is the word that's all this stuff is translated in because these guys all use the same fucking language for this in French, luckily. But with this, because we do exist socially, is the third step, because you have to be knowable. You have to express yourself clearly and consistently. Otherwise, you are a dangerous thing. If you're evil, your ability to dissimulate is the worst thing for the herd. Quote, we despise the secret. We despise the unrecognizable. Consequently, you must consider yourself knowable. You may not be concealed from yourself. You may not believe that you change. So the herd, this is just Nietzsche, by the way, the herd demands that we have stable identities, that we have a level of predictability, I should change that we have a consistent character. The way people get angry when like a character in a story does something that they wouldn't ever do, you too. This is what we're like in the real world. You have to have an interiority that can be communicated. It has to be expressible. And you also must be accountable for things you do. These aren't moral demands. This is not a moral thing. That's not it. It's existential requirements as a gregarious life requires. You cannot function gregariously at large with the herd, with people, unless there are stable subjects. You need to have communication, exchange, cooperation, punishment. All of these things are about a persistent identity, and a persistent identity bears into that. So the pressures of all of this collective enforcement reinforces the stability that has emergently been formed. Again, not a conscious conspiracy. This is not some dude saying, here are the things you're going to do. No, it's a distributed social pressure. Anyone who displays too much of their flux, don't pull your flux out in a movie theater kind of thing. The moment that happens is sanctioned, is damaged, is labeled mad and insane and schizophrenic. Wrong book. Is labeled criminal, is labeled unreliable. And then as that happens, there's a weird colonization that happens. And he uses that phrase in the book, which I really like. For even when we are alone, silent, speaking internally to ourselves, it is still the outside speaking to us, thanks to these signs from the exterior that invade and occupy us, whose murmuring totally covers over our impulsive life. Even our innermost recesses, even our so-called inner life, is still the residue of signs instituted from the outside under the pretext of signifying us in an objective and impartial manner. So, he's saying, actually, there isn't an original interiority. That's not how it works. There is no interiority. That's not a thing that exists. Instead, interiority is actually us internalizing an external sign system. So if you have a voice in your head, I don't. We've had discussions about this. It's long, but when you think or when you consider the world, you do it in the language you didn't invent, using concepts and slices of the world imposed by the large gregarious space. This organizes your experiences as the institutional categories demand, right? So we have, in this process, specifically, we start with the intensive fluctuations, which produces affects. The social world provides signs to explain these affects to ourselves. And again, this is just four people grunting around a fucking fire can do this. You create signs that explain these affects, and they always abbreviate. which is fine. They simplify, they allow communication, they reduce complexity. We then internalize these signs, believing that they express our feelings truly. I'm putting in quotes if you don't see me on camera. And then these internalized signs then organize our experience. And we experience this organized interiority as our self. Now, all of this put together is wholly emergent. And what happens, and this is the shift of what he's doing, is it's just to read a quote: "We are possessed, abandoned, and possessed again and surprised, sometimes by the system of impulsive designations, at other times by the system of everyday signs." What he's done in this, as this has been built and set up, one, it's not saying one is bad or good. He's not having, we're beyond good and evil, as one might say. Instead, he's talking about the way that these things are sort of built, but they're not the same system. Impulsive designations and everyday signs aren't the same system. They're fundamentally different. They're not levels of a hierarchy. On the one side, we have impulsive designations. On the other, everyday signs. These don't complement each other. This isn't conscious or unconscious, which he does away with, which I'm becoming more of a fan of every day. Instead, this is about almost these things competing for possession of you, the agent, the support agent. SUPPOT is a funky French fucking term he uses. Because it's not that consciousness is shallow or deeper compared to impulsive life. That's not what it is. It is occluding the deeper life. So all this is going on, right? And this system is building and it goes. And this is just how everyone lives. That's great. That's what you do. But these things collide, and there's constant need to sort of cover over. Complex intensities start bursting out. We have to cover over them with new names, new rules of those things, new signs. And this stable I that's consistently existing there is constantly being, we'll say, stressed by this system, right? And that I is the big deal because, just to quote, "There is one sign in this code that always corresponds to either the highest or lowest degree of intensity, namely the self, the I, the subject of our propositions. It is thanks to this sign, which nonetheless is nothing but an always variable trace of a flux, that we constitute ourselves as thinking." So the I is a weird one because it's the thing we use externally, but it's also referring to this inner turmoil, this like weird chaos at the same time that is happening. It's the I itself is not a stable referent. It's not a stable sign. It's a simple sign, I. It's a single letter, great. But it's actually a marker of extremes. It appears, as he says, when intensity reaches peak or trough, the most extreme. At those moments, intensity becomes aware of itself, and it splits into observer-observed. These moments of intensity, you could see it in the chat, people chatting here, how we talk, how I talk. The moment you become aware of yourself, whether it's the lowest or the highest, again, this is not depressive or manic is not really the thing. It's intensities. But these things that happen here, it's weird. And this splitting into observer-observed, like, is at odds, right, with the codes of everyday signs, because those things fixate this temporary marker that is something that, as we forget, as we go through time, is not intended to be permanent. It's referring to I at this moment, but thanks to the system of signs that's constantly trying to cover up and do all this, and I'm adding a little bit more agency. It's not like trying to do this, but the system of signs does this, and its interaction is to create this permanent identity. The more extreme these things get, as these bounce back and forth, the reification is reinforced, and that subject underneath is paved over. And that's why, like, it's really weird, but like during moments of crisis, ecstasy, orgasm or trauma, the ego is somehow, like us as a consistent thing, is somehow more solid, but also not a thing we refer to at the same time. Like the self becomes that, but we wouldn't say, like in those moments, rarely do people say or talk about I in the same way. It's not like a casual referral. It's this incredible burst of intensities. So this weirdness that is starting to happen here, this consciousness that becomes sort of aware of itself, is its own beast that deals with the outside world through exchange. And it's not that consciousness is, sorry, just real quick. Let me just really quick finish. I know, read real quick. Sorry, it's just the last step. Because we end up with this thing that is kind of a capacity for exchange. Just to read the last quote, I promise I'm almost done. I know it's a lot. Our consciousness would merely be a capacity to enter into an exchange with the exteriority of the code of everyday signs. This capacity would amount to little more than receiving as much as possible while giving as little as possible. This is not saying consciousness is this pure interiority accessing an inner truth. It is that consciousness is an interface for economic exchanges with the social world. Receiving signs, producing responses as little as possible, but receiving as much as possible, minimizing the exposure of the impulsive life, protecting this unique, odd moment, singularity of all these impulses come together. And all of this feels like it works. This translation between the intensive flux and social demands. Almost done. The eternal return as a thing, and Nietzsche's breaks, it's I'm not going to try to summarize too much, but this interaction ends up becoming, as this consciousness economy sort of exists, there's moments where it understands itself, or it enters into exchange with itself, because the complexity gets to a point. There's a bunch of different stuff he talks about. At this point, it is not that there is a break with meaning or any of this. It's as consciousness enters into exchange with itself, exchange with anything else disappears, effectively entirely. And that structure, this this shared, stable, communicable sign system that enables social coordination, now dealing with itself and understanding that it is calling back to itself, that it will come back to this moment of understanding itself, that the awareness of itself that happened probably the first time that we all experienced it, but that we break away from and then we come back to, this foundation of the eternal return, as I'm reading it in this paragraph. Again, you can go straight nihilistic, can't be separated from the lack of meaning, because it's an awareness that everything we're doing is effectively performative and built for this, but at the same time has this grounding that gives us a new way to sort of build off of. And this is where the meaning of things builds from. Sorry, it's a lot. I have like a million notes, and as you can tell, I have literal essays already somewhat pre-written about this, because these are the things I'm wanting to discuss as I do this book. I love this book.
Yeah. That's all making very good sense to me, especially like the conscious ego as representative. I'm sure you're probably familiar with the split brain study, where they flash a direction to one side of the brain. The person stands up and then goes. It was to walk to a wall, and then when they were asked to the other side of the brain what reason they did that for, they looked over, saw a glass of water and or an empty glass and a pitcher. They poured themselves the water and then said, "I was thirsty." And when asked about it later, they personally felt that they experienced no deception whatsoever. So they did not intend deception with that. And so, like the fact that our ego can be so unaware of what else is going on in the mind and yet so confidently take responsibility for it is a really, really strong case for exactly that.
Yeah, very much.
The other thought I was having was what makes that form of consciousness that was mentioned there of the systems of like difference and repetition turning back on themselves. what makes that exactly different from difference of repetition itself? Because if you have an emergent process of one thing, right, and it is reflexively engaging with another, then is that system itself not just a flow of consciousness, right?
Yeah. So
But
the
then,
very, very, very short answer is I don't think there's like, not to, I hate using the word difference when we talk about these books. The difference between these ideas, I think, is not as wide as I used to think. I
mhm.
used to see them as drastically different plays. Oh, I read a little bit of Klossowski, Living Currency. Oh, he's doing something. I can see how it connects into, Anti-Oedipus a little bit and this and that. Um, I no longer really do. I see that, to me, as I'm reading it, Klossowski's getting very much the same place that Deleuze did in DNR. Uh, the process of it and the lyrical quality of his writing in comparison, and I think his explanations, I find to be more, uh, for me, eminently graspable.
Mhm.
Um, and what Deleuze did is ultimately more, just kind of a more complex version of it. Because it's his thesis. It's a crazy ass fucking complicated book, but it's brilliant, and it goes into different versions of this, and it's much more of a breakdown, logically, actually, of the systems rather than sort of talking through the experience of them, which I think is more Klossowski's jam.
That makes sense. I see. So this is more of like a starting from a phenomenological perspective, trying to sort of refer to the same sort of like dynamic object as what Deleuze might be approaching from a purely like structuralist perspective. Well, and
Yeah, and I think I mean there's a lot of plays in these. There are differences. I've made the comment that a lot of what Klossowski's talking about here, as he's talking about how these signs come to be formed, like it's the three syntheses in Anti-Oedipus are almost part and parcel, but then in another part, 100% he's going through more or less. He's outlining the three syntheses from DNR, which are different syntheses, and how memory works. But like the idea that he's not referring to this idea, fundamentally putting us in a spot and giving a sort of experiential proof of why repetition and the difference of repetition is an affirmative generative thing that isn't born of negativity. That's part of this. I mean, for all of these guys, and I would argue probably still for a lot of people, the negativity of identity as the foundation for how things exist or where meaning comes from is baked into a whole bunch of these guys. Not these guys, but like philosophers, writing, critical theory, and all of that. And they're decidedly against that. And this is them trying to find an affirmative, and I think very effectively building an affirmative case for difference being the base rather than identity. That's just my opinion, though.
so by that, do you mean like there many philosophers are coming from the perspective of shit? I have confused myself.
And you go ahead.
Oh, never mind.
I mean, we can go through it. It'd be a lot. It's a lot to sort of talk about.
I mean, if it doesn't derail your reading too much, I'm definitely
I mean,
interested.
technically, it's all about the book. Yeah, so far, you're not like asking stuff that's unrelated. Like it's related. I'm
Fair.
just trying to see if it's.
But yeah, I suppose I was curious, like, where would you place a few philosophers on that spectrum if you had to?
uh, uh, Lacan, Zizek, Foucault, by his own admission and words, Bifo, and a few others as well. Like there's even, I would say, contemporary land in the place of the negation, like things are because they are what they aren't, versus versus the way that like we can talk about an emergent hey, actually through the repetition of things and that of difference in itself, like that being the sort of baseline, it tends to be how I understand it. And again, someone's going to correct me in the comments. I have no fucking doubt.
I see, but I suppose my question then would be, given negation is actually a very important part of this, the whole bit about like forgetting, for example, and that
Forgetting's not negation.
well, it's so
It's not.
if they're talking about it like I'm not as familiar with the Zizek Lacan Foucault as I'd like to be, but I know just like a little bit about or a little of Foucault's, and so the idea of the negation as like a shaping thing is still a very active force in that world, right? And it functions as sort of like there are markers that point to a thing that is very much an active object. And in the same way, here we have markers that refer to a thing which is not currently absent to the, or is not currently present to the uh, like semiotic process that is manipulating those signs or that information, right? That is in communication. Like when you give me words, I'm just getting the presence of the words, and from that, I am trying to build out a network and infer the absence of the thought that formed them, and also the thought that you might be trying to instantiate in my mind, right? And so, to me, these actually seem to be very similar, right?
Okay. Um, so how I understand, for example, let's take Lacan, just so we can just pin down one version of this, because there's a million versions of this. The subject, you, the agent, the whatever, emerges from a fundamental lack of being. That is the thing. The lack of existence is what enables all of this. The desire, actually, fundamentally, to function. Like it's not nothing. It's not emergent. It's a lack, a negation, not a recognition of negation, but actually the negation itself. There's a void that is lack for these guys. Okay. It's an absence, an absence itself that requires filling. And that void exists as as part of a system that is ultimately productive, but it is a void that needs filling. Identity exists as what is not there. That's the thing. And Klossowski basically answers that by saying, well, but wait, the recognition of it is an affirmation that for example, if you, in any of those optical illusions where it's like you cut out the letters instead of draw the letters. So you draw the outlines of them and it's like what's missing is the numbers, but it still required an affirming of what is missing for Klossowski. So to him, there is not actually a birth of a lack. Whereas with Lacan, the actual lack itself, a mirror stage, for example, a child at some point realizes that it is not the thing it's seeing. There's not an affirmative for Lacan in that sense. It is a recognition of what is fundamentally missing in the subject that allows the subject to exist. And this thing at the center of all of that is what enables Lacan's sort of au revoir in general. Zizek as a thing. It's a big deal with these guys. It's
That
a
makes
compensation for absence.
Would my lens on that would be that this is more of a difference of essentialism versus the role of absence when getting into like brass tacks of what they really mean by that, right? Given that what if Lacan is basically saying that we have an empty glass, right? And Klossowski is coming back with saying like, therefore the glass can be filled, but it's not like that you have to fill the glass. It's a thing that can happen, right? But also that the glass can change shape, right? If the glass does change shape, or for example, I think rivers are a great analogy. Rivers dig their own trenches, their own shape, right? And as a result, the shape of the trench essentially becomes the absence that the river will, through sheer physics, fill. But also, it's not eternal; it's not essential. And so, perhaps Lacan's mistake here, or difference, would be in declaring that the river always flows exactly one way, and that any failure to fill water within it, when it dries up, that we have an empty river, you know.
So at this point, I'm going to end up arguing for things because I look. This is how I understand. This is how I would argue Deleuze and Klossowski talk about lack as well. That the way that we understand the negation is through the affirmation of things. That we actually the example they use in Anti-Oedipus, which I love, is when we talk about incest taboo. There was a prohibition against incest in primitive tribes because we looked back and we went, look, there's no incest happening there, therefore there's a prohibition. That way of us looking at things is the critique. Now, how Deleuze and Klossowski and others, Lapujade and Smith have sort of written about it in Holland, is the point is that we're looking back and we're affirmatively creating that lack in the space that we recognize because we were like, it's an affirmative space. I'm not sure this would be the same as I understand negation exists in and Lacan's version is more sophisticated, granted, but certainly in thinkers before him, where negation is central to it. Certainly in Foucault, where he goes into lack being particularly a pure negation, and how it functions as motor, but it is lack as motor. The absence of things is the deal. The real is not missing from the symbolic. It is an impossible kernel that makes the symbolization necessary and perpetual. It is not simply zero, but a negative magnitude of things. This is like Zizek and less than nothing is the whole point for him. That's what lack is. That it's not just zero, but it is a negative magnitude that basically shifts how we understand space. Castration isn't literal loss, because that would mean that we had a thing. It's entry into a structure where lack is constitutive of the structure. Something missing is structural. The productive negativity is from that lack. Now, that lack, us talking about it and you talking about the river, these are affirming ways to talk about what is missing, but not to say, well, for the river to be there in the first place, there has to be a lack. That's not really how it works. There's just interactions, and it's the ability for us to call that things out. Like pure negation, as I read it, and I think as Klossowski does and others, is it negates itself. I exist, so not to exist is a weird statement. It's this is abolishing of reality rather than affirming it. As again, I read this, and Klossowski dives into this with Sade, so does Deleuze, actually. And we could get into that. That's probably offline here, to say the least, because that's a whole other thing, Sade and all of this. But like, when we're talking about lack, even if it's a minor amount or whatever, which is more Lacan's, is like, again, not pure negation. It's affirming negation. That's why Zizek, I fucking hate talking about this stuff. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Brooke. Shut the fuck up. The whole point for Deleuze and Klossowski, though, as I read it, is there is no lack, period. There's no such thing, like, at all. Even if we were to say something's missing, no, it's not. The saying something's missing is actually an affirmation itself. It is plenitude in totality. Identity does not come from a void or a missing part that we can contrast, but from an abbreviation of excessive fullness.
That makes sense. The way I look at it is that this might be another case where the ontological versus transcendental divide, like, is causing, or is the root cause of the disagreement between a group of philosophers, where those who reify lack are looking at it from the transcendental perspective, wherein I would say lack is almost certainly a transcendental precondition for any type of cognition that I've ever observed.
Well, so I would ask, is lack reactive or productive?
It's both. Definitely both.
So that would be the difference. So Deleuze and Klossowski, there's no reactive. It's not reactive. It's productive.
Exactly, and I would say ontologically, the idea of the reactive doesn't make any sense. On like a really brute metaphysics, right? Whereas transcendentally, it starts to make a lot of sense, wherein you can have something that is shaped in such a way where cognition can recognize that a flow is very likely as a result of what they're observing. So a dried out river during dry season, right? One or a cognitive agent of some kind can look at that and say, I know when the floods come again, that's where they're going to go.
Well, so and
And
this is where for me Klossowski is absolutely talking about what you're talking about, and Hegel and Lacan and Zizek are not, as I read them. It's really particular because the Buddhist idea of like emptiness, right? Sunyata, uh, people talk about being similar to Hegel's negative or Lacan's lack, but those are absence of something. To me, sunyata and what we're talking about here is emptiness as such, almost as a referent to itself. The center doesn't exist. It's not lost. Having it exist would actually, or finding it even, would actually stop the movement that it enables. And this is the play that like Klossowski is doing weird shit, because what we're talking about with the circle is this center, a focus, a void, perhaps even a god, which inspires circular movement and is expressed in it, yet which is kept at a distance. He's playing in a really different way. Instead of talking about privation, which is traditional lack, the idea that something is missing or something is taken away, this isn't that. It's indiscernibility is at the core of it. Intensities so extreme, they are imperceptible. And it's not that you don't like that they're not there, not imperceptible in that sense, but like white noise that you experience as silence. The highest affirmation, the highest of all of this, and total absence are indistinguishable, not through negation, but actually excess, because nothing can be abbreviated at this point. It breaks all of those systems. The signs become referable only to themselves, not to the larger systems.
that makes sense. It's sort of like if one takes a pure like structuralist lens, the only means through which you can identify that a thing is through its behavioral interactions with other things. And so something not being present in a system or active or have engaging in behavior in a system is pretty much indistinguishable from something that obliterates all the behavior in the system and doesn't interact with anything else as a result.
Hi, Brock.
Hello. I saw you. I was
Hi.
just about to go, oh no, Afnan's here. Here we go.
No,
Please
no,
correct away.
no, no. I want not at all. Just a simple question, and silly and stupid one.
That is not how
Just
you
like
work.
because
That is not how you
no, no.
work.
I do. It is. So just a simple stupid question. Like if someone asks you what is ontology, and I'm not here talking about what is ontology to Deleuze, what is ontology to this, what is ontology? Like what do we mean when we say ontology differs from transcendental?
Did I say that?
Like, no, no. I mean, Red say that. Read, sorry. And I just want to understand what is ontology to you. That's it. I want no further questions. Simple
How
answer will
how
do.
how meaning is made, how things are made, like in the thingness of them, I guess. That's a really stupid way to say it.
Okay,
Like,
so to me personally, it is still the classical definition of it, which is the study of being qua being.
sure.
Okay,
I mean,
so uh-huh. Go
that's
ahead.
how I'd use it. I mean, I'd probably add a little bit more to the processes that come to be and what how they make things. I don't know.
Yeah, now that's when we were talking about okay, Deleuzian process ontology, and then when we're speaking of phenomenological ontology to Heidegger or whatever,
Well, I
And
would still argue
that's
that like
already,
phenomenological ontology, even with Heidegger, or go even further back to like Aristotle, you're still talking about the processes that make things.
yeah. But it's the point of it is the study part of it. Yeah, don't you agree? Like,
Say,
because I feel like sometimes I'm not sure either is it because like maybe my English or something, but sometimes I feel like when people say ontology as something that differs from transcendental, they have the concept of ontology as they equate ontology to being and not. And here I don't mean read. I'm sorry, it's not like me picking on that.
No,
It's
no,
just because I
sorry.
really misunderstood. Because I seem like I like a lot of people that I talk to here, they use ontology as if they're speaking about being and not ontology.
oh,
Like they
I can
use.
explain this. I've had this discussion. I can explain this one. I think I can explain
Okay,
this one.
well,
So, one, when you said, when I talk to people here, so you're not like, we have to be very particular because I know exactly what you're talking about. This happens in the QC a lot, and you'll probably hear me do this actually, because there's a weird, when you spend so much time reading any of these fucking texts, like at all, ontology shifts to being like the more traditional definition to being much more, hey, boy, I noticed that people have when people have a certain understanding of the way things are, like what is fundamentally real, there's a system that just builds the rest of the world. And that thing is what people refer to as like their ontology. Your ontology decides what you think is fundamentally real, and then everything else sort of follows from there. Like the way that you might say, this is a really bad version of this, but if you're, hey, I believe the laws of science are fundamentally real, you would be like a logical positivist or some shit like that. Like the ontology decides what you think is fundamentally real and everything else follows from there. And so people tend to say and equate that fundamental thing they think is real because the presumption is there for the rest that sort of generatively comes from that. Right? So like,
I see. Okay.
like Aristotle, things are fundamentally stable entities. Like identity is the ground. That kind of builds the rest. It's substance ontology, but it builds the rest of it. Like there's more to be done with it, and it does take more reasoning and more. Like I've oversimplified in a horrifying way, but like we were just doing with Lacan, I could say it's a negation ontology or void ontology because the constitutive thing of what is real is the void. Being emerges from the negative, and the rest follows. I shouldn't say it like that, but that is how I'm using the words. And with Klossowski, Nietzsche, Deleuze, it's an intensive ontology, which is like, again, what is real, and then the rest comes. I know what ontology is, Raoul Durable, and I think that's kind of the point that Afnan's making is like, we're talking about more of a colloquial usage, and I think this bleeds in because of a lot of, we spend a lot of time in the QC, and it's a very, the reason when you said that, it flipped a light switch, because we've had this discussion, because when we first started, we were kind of like assholes about making sure people use words in certain ways, which yes, anti-Deleuzian, don't care. We were doing it. And the conversation happened where it was like, hey, we need to be correcting people because the whole point is people coming here to learn philosophy. But the reality of how people use these terms in the colloquial or at large, or I guess the code of everyday signs, just bring it back to the text. That's not how people use these fucking words. And so in the QC, we have a weird crossover of people who really have, like, we have people who've written doctoral theses that utilize the term correctly and have spent years and years and years studying it. And then we also have people who watch 3 YouTube videos and talk about it. These people can't talk to each other, not in terms of using the jargon in the same way. So jargon needs to become more malleable. And so it tends to have this odd sort of edge to it. Sorry, Afnan. I think that's getting at what you're talking about. It's a really fascinating outcome to me, but I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I would say on like a very like practical level, I feel that there's like a multimodal distribution of like clusters of meanings for the term ontology. One of them is definitely the study. Another one, though, I would say like going back to the Greek like logos root and its connection to leg as like ordering, collecting, categorizing things, or logos as like the underlying logic behind a system or a process in action. Ontology could also be considered, rather than just the study of being, also the different ways of categorizing manners of being. And as a result, that's where the sort of like noun or object ontology, I think, arises as a like a linguistic tool to refer to one's individual approach to thinking about ontology. And as a result, they call it their ontology. And in this case, I would say the reason why I chose the word ontology there is not necessarily to use it in like a correct or absolute sense in either of those ways, but rather to put it on a spectrum between the epistemological and the ontological, wherein I regard, and this is kind of some of my own like weird thought, the transcendental as being sort of like a thing in between, wherein there are things that are always true for epistemic experience that are not necessarily features of ontological reality, if that makes sense. And that's why I think the transcendental is such an interesting thing to play around with, because it's like we have these almost objective epistemic truths about how epistemic experience itself functions, if that makes sense.
No, and it's one of the things, like, I know he was a fucking Nazi, but like the thing that is fascinating about Heidegger's shit is he kind of did an like, what is the ontology of ontology? Like, that's like, what the fuck does being mean? Is there a being itself? How do we get to ontic versus ontological as a distinction? And I think like post Heidegger, especially, that question, if there's a specter, it feels like that would be hitting, because a lot of these writers, and Deleuze goes through this, I know Klossowski tarries with it, like ontology and epistemology aren't the same thing. For those following at home, what is what is your theory of being? Like, what exists? Epistemology is, how do we know that? Kind of. I'm sorry to simplify. Apologies. Like, the point is simplifying. And Heidegger was like, oh yeah, well, what is being? What exists? Yeah, but what is existing if that's what exists? And that's like, his whole thing was like playing with that. What we don't want to do is conflate them. And that's like, it's what makes this stuff interesting to me, because like the conflating of the categories that's been going on since fucking Kant, basically. I feel like that's been going on since Kant, maybe even before that. But like, Nietzsche isn't a perspectivist that's relativist. These are two different things. The whole point is that knowledge is perspective, but being remains. Like, as a thing, what is being, how it works, these things are different conversations. Like, we say Klossowski has an intensive ontology. What we're saying is that intensities and affects are what fundamentally exist. Everything else is derivative from these processes. That's how I use the term, and it's really, God damn it. Now we got in a fucking discussion about jargon, which is so fun, but God damn it.
Well, I do think that these particular words are some of the most interesting ones to dig into. Well, I also think, like, when it comes to discussions about jargon, the ones that I don't find particularly compelling are like how it should be used. I mean, to some degree, unless it's
I'm with you on that for sure. No, I know exactly what you mean.
Exactly. But rather, like, I think digging into etymology and how people actually do use them, like on a descriptive level rather than a prescriptive level, is extremely illuminating, and is, in fact, arguably the fundamental basis behind philosophy itself, is like just signs interrogating themselves.
Does that help anything you're saying, Afnan? Or answer anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't mean to be the asshole that asks, like you said. I didn't mean that. It's just that I was confused.
No.
I felt like, yeah.
I'll tell you right now, if you're confused, trust me, more than a few other people are too. And that's fine. Like, that's the point, is to talk through these things. That's the whole fucking point.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Fun discussion though. Man, we had a Heidegger reading for a while on the QC that moved to the Continental philosophy server. Kent and the other guys were running it. It was fucking amazing because it was like reading Heidegger through Deleuze, which is a whole bunch of smarter people.
Let me correct you, please. Reading Deleuze through Heidegger.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Okay, no.
I'm just saying what we described the reading as. I'm just saying what we described the reading as.
I also did it that way, which is Heidegger through Deleuze. But then with time through it, I actually figured out the real, which also Guattari figured out, the fundamental points that Heidegger affected Deleuze or influenced Deleuze. And that's why when I told you Deleuze before meeting Guattari is not Deleuze after Guattari. Because Deleuze before Guattari is more of a Heideggerian Deleuze. After Guattari, he completely abandoned Heidegger and he became this new thing with Guattari. And you remember this discussion we had it, and we went through some points on it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is exactly what I did, which is I read Heidegger through Deleuze as I read Deleuze before. So I already had the concept of things, and I guess that's what helped me to distinguish them and find them exactly on Heidegger's or in his text, in some sense.
It's good shit. I think it's good shit. I'm fascinated by it. This is the fun stuff. Do we do another paragraph? I think we do another paragraph. How does everyone else feel about doing another paragraph? Anyone? No? Maybe?
I'm up for a paragraph.
All right, we'll do another one. Why the fuck not? All right, let's see. Oh, my Lord. This is going to be a fun one. Just 1 second. Let me bring up my fucking notes, get back to it, because I was skipping around kind of a lot. I have a lot of notes on this. And I'm kind of scattered. I've got 4 fucking essays that I finally have finished writing. Reading? What the fuck? And one got really complicated yesterday because it's about literacy. And then someone, a wonderful YouTuber who I do like, put out a video on the Post-Literate Society. And it's a very bad video. So so that got added. So my notes are kind of everywhere right now. Ugh. Let's make our way through it. All right. So, the circle, capital C, lowercase c, doesn't really matter. The circle, the sign, the eternal return, whatever. This is the subject of this next one, just so you know what he means when he says here. Here is a sign in which I myself am nothing. There was no ping for Vicious Circle today? Well, I mean, join. If you haven't, you should just join the fucking, you'll get pinged. If I start the event and you've said you want to go RSVP, you'll get pinged. August. Did you miss much? 2 hours. Here is a sign.
Actually, I didn't get a notification either. Sorry.
That's weird. Fucking Discord.
Yeah, although I have notifications on.
What the fuck? All right, I'll do a ping next time. It's supposed to do a ping automatically. Very annoying. Very annoying. Here is a sign in which I myself am nothing, a sign to which I always return for nothing. What is my part in this circular movement in relation to which I am incoherent, or in relation to this thought that's so perfectly coherent that it excludes me at the very moment I think it? What is the sign of the circle that empties every designation of its content for the sake of this sign? The high tonality of the soul becomes the highest thought only by restoring the intensity to itself, by integrating the chaos from which it emanates with the sign of the circle which it has formed. This should be okay. This should be okay, I think. Boop, 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 boop. Yeah, this will probably be a little quicker, actually. Yeah, okay. Here is a sign in which I myself am nothing, a sign to which I always return for nothing. We were just talking about the nothing, the negative, the emptiness, the absence that is sort of built out of this. The I myself am nothing. It's not simply relativizing. It's not diminishing the self. It is, again, creating that nullity. That nullity of it. It's not that you are less important. I has no substance here. No substance at all. And the phrasing, Rien, the nothing. Here's a sign to which I am nothing, a sign to which I was returned for nothing. I can't not relate it to we just had this ontological discussion. This is making the play literally. I don't know how, maybe my brain's doing something that's not there now. This is literally making the transition from ontological to teleological. This is the what I am to the why I return. The return itself, I'm sorry, Afnan, you're probably like, what the fuck? But like that feels like this is what he's doing. He's playing with this thing right now. The return itself, it has no purpose. It doesn't have a goal. It's got no why. This is not a pessimistic negation. This is like structural necessity. If the circle happens, there can be no ultimate purpose for it. Like if there was a purpose, there would be a stopping point for the circle. So if the eternal return is true, it can't have a goal. It can't have an end point. It can't have those things. It's a sign in which I myself am nothing, a sign to which I always return for nothing. For nothing. What is my part in this circular movement in relation to which I am incoherent? Or in relation to this thought that is so perfectly coherent, it excludes me at the very moment I think it? Well, this is the fucking whole aporia of the thing, right? We have two claims paradoxically held at once. I am an incoherent thing in relation to this circular movement. The movement itself, coherent. I understand it. It's self-consistent. It's complete. It's clear to me. I get it. I, as a thinking subject, I don't remain coherent with it. My existence is incoherent when confronted with the circle. But at the same time, the thought excludes me at the moment I think it. The thought of it is perfectly cohere by excluding me, who's thinking it. It's not that you fail to grasp the thought of it. The thought succeeds, and it succeeds by making the thinker impossible. So, we just asked, what is my part? Well, that's not answerable. If the eternal return, if the circle is coherent, there's no part for me. A part for me would mean that it's got a purpose. If it's got a purpose, it ends. So, nope, I am excluded by its perfection. If I had a part, the circle would lose its coherence. Right? This is ontological impossibility. I cannot exist while thinking about this thing. The thought doesn't transcend capacity. It annihilates me. Right? Spinoza, is who I relate this back to. Spinoza talked about the way that if we think from the perspective of eternity, it dissolves the perspective of the individual. That's it. Spinoza wrote about this. Ethics, part 5. It's about God and all that shit. But it's like from that position, the individual doesn't exist. This way, one substance, blah, 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 all that shit. But Klossowski is maybe extending it much further, because this is not about a higher viewpoint. This is not, God or eternity or something higher that we're looking down on the world with. It's the very dissolution of viewpoints as viewpoints. Yeah. So he says, what is the sign of the circle that empties every designation of its content for the sake of this sign? In a way, the circle is a bit of a absolute master signifier, but not in like the Lacanian way, like almost inverting it entirely. With Lacan's master signifier, or any master signifier, God, the reason, logic, nation, whatever, these things. These organize other signs hierarchically and maintain the content of those. This is a Anti-Oedipus, they talk about overcoding. That's Lacanian master signification. It organizes signs in a hierarchy, sort of painting over them, but maintaining them in that chain and maintaining their content as it is. The circle in the eternal return is far more radical. It removes and evacuates content entirely from every other sign. What is the sign of the circle that empties every designation of its content for the sake of this sign? Designations aren't disappearing. There's still designations. They simply are hollow and empty. They function linguistically, but they don't have reference. I don't know how else to say this. This is how I read. I promise you, this is the book. This is the point. It's an insane statement, and it's a wonderful statement. He'll be making this case throughout it. To me, this is wonderfully pure Nietzsche. It's written so exact. It's those moments of life, I hope everyone can identify with this, where you realize the words you're saying are empty and arbitrary sounds. Maybe you've been writing for too long, so the word as you spell it doesn't make sense anymore. The word answer, or you say it and it disconnects from you. It breaks you. This thing, it's hollow. It's not that the words are gone. You're somehow still able to understand the words even, but they cease to have reference. And this is not an accident. They do this for the sake of this sign. The circle doesn't empty designations oopsie. It's by necessity. To maintain perfect circularity, it has to drain significance from everything. If anything retained any stability in its content at all, the closure of the circle would never happen. Like this is going into, and again, this is super Nietzsche here. This is will to power, nihilism is high value, all that shit, right? Like the eternal return is not one thought amongst others. This is the thought that makes thinking itself impossible. Once you've thought this, you cannot think about anything else with meaning, because the circle has demonstrated nothing has stable content across time. Paul the Apostle, Ontology. Love never fails. Where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but a poor reflection, as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. I do like that. So I got to tell you, there's a lot of really good verses that Christians just don't care about. A lot of good verses. True of every religion. So this is fundamentally playing with and sort of concluding the mechanism of how this comes about. Because again, this is not, this is just the way it is. It's like, no, there's mechanisms. All designations require a temporal stability to maintain their content. Every designation. I, dog, computer, Brooks, Deleuze, ontology, metaphysics, Afnan, Reed, doesn't fucking matter. The circle itself and the encounter with the circle reveals that nothing has stability across time because everything returns as different. Everything. So all designations lose their meaning, not their linguistic, I should say that. All designations lose grounding. They become formal operators and have no semantic content. Except for the circle. It retains its meaning as a form of meaninglessness. Yeah.
How do we feel about limits? Because there are certain mathematical limits that seem to control things while they're in a certain space. And there's an odd trait that analytical objects seem to be capable of having, wherein they are able to emerge as a thing which pulls itself back to a given point that implies the existence of that point. And I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this myself.
I don't have an answer for that.
That's fair.
I wish I did. I don't have an answer for that. That's yeah.
What about Badiou's category theory? I think.
Well, what about
Reed's
Deleuze's
point-
category theory?
I mean, I feel like Reed's point can be seen from Badiou's perspective there. So it is Deleuze, or it engaged with Deleuze in some way. So yeah, no, because in some mathematical levels to Badiou, you would have this momentary thing where the category is all the parts within it, but then eventually you would have this paradoxal moment where can the category, which is again the paradoxal thing that came with the Bertrand Russell, which is can the universe be the sum of all its parts? Yeah, this paradoxal moment of the God and proving that God doesn't exist and whatever. But to Badiou, no, there is a mathematical, I forgot the term for it, but like there is this mathematical thing that actually exists in the category and outside it simultaneously. And because of it, the category is part of itself, while it is not part of itself, since it is the sum of all its parts. No?
I'm too stupid.
I think that those objects exist on the cognitive level. And then as to whether or not they exist, because I assume that what you're talking about is related to a kind of emergence, right? It sounds like it's related to strong emergence. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, it is definitely emergence, then. That's the whole point of the category. But
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. But I'm trying to think of it just in mathematics, as you put it, where the limits. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that I find really weird about this is that so if strong emergence is a real thing, right? Then it means that this problem that Russell has, is somehow solved by reality in some way, right? It clearly means that his tools for addressing it are not sufficient to make sense of what we're observing. Now, I would say that strong emergence does exist on the transcendental level. I don't think that I would be confident in saying that strong emergence could really make much sense at all on the like deeper ontological level. The weird thing though is that transcendental level immediately becomes relevant the moment that any kind of cognition occurs. And based off of my observation of everything that's going on in the ontology that underlies all this shit, it appears that it makes a lot of systems of difference and repetition, and some of them actually turn into reflexive cognition, like myself, for example. But there's rocks all over the place that we see through telescopes, right? And the interesting question, the transcendental question, is if life arises somewhere else, or cognition, or I personally kind of conflate the two terms because I think they're inextricable. If those arise somewhere else, are there laws about how they'll behave that are something that we can empirically and analytically deduce based off of what we see around us, right? And if the answer is yes, then that means that there are transcendental strong emergences, potentially, that are things that could not be identified as behavior until one had put together the cognitive faculties required to identify that some interesting behavior would emerge from the system. If that makes sense.
I honestly need to think. Because I'm trying to remember the exact way. Okay, so if we're thinking about Leibniz in some sense, this Brooks might interest you. How do you understand Leibniz when he mentions that the good, I think in English it would be the best of the God's world, yeah, or
Hold
God
on
the
one
best
second.
world or something in English. That God shows that we are already existing in the best possible world, yeah, between all the possibilities. See above. Okay.
So I just as
Yeah,
a thing, anyone who's into or getting into set theory, then category theory, and then systems theory, our own Kent Palmer, who's if you weren't part of our group early on, for the first like 3 years, Kent was basically in every reading, and his horrifyingly encyclopedic knowledge of every thinker in ways that are still to this day, very few people I think have come. He's a wonderful, just encyclopedia. It's been his fundamental work is schemas theory, and it's worth, if you're playing in this space, and I hear all the words you're using, would be worth diving through a little bit. Just mentioning.
Checking it.
It's a lot. So just like, this is not a small thing. It's been his fundamental life's work for like the last, I want to say 20-ish years, but he's really been doing a lot in the last 12. Like this is his deal. This is Kent's thing.
Interesting. That's very helpful.
Yeah, I don't know if it is, because it's stuff that I'm working up towards at some point, because he is far ahead of me on a lot of this stuff. But I do know that he has real chops in terms of like real actual development, because we've had like work talk about how engineers and engineering and architecture of software functions. Like he's really got a stunning knowledge. But he, which is weird, because when you hear about him and you talk to him, you're like, oh, he's a comp sci background. It's like, no, his first doctorate was in sociology at the London School of Economics. And then he got a second one for philosophy of science, which is like a wild combination. And it really does yield a really unique view on a lot of stuff. So
Beautiful. Thank you for it.
yeah,
I'll try to check it.
he's one of the people at some point that I hope to be able to actually have real conversations with about the stuff they're working on, because his brain, and it's, if you're mentioning monads, like period, if you're starting to talk about Leibniz, best of all possible, like all that shit, you're speaking Kant's language, and his ears are burning right now, like flatly. He's like, oh my God, someone somewhere is calling me. There's a Kant signal. So,
Honestly, I would be very interested to talk to him or to read his part on that, because I do have this way of understanding Leibniz. I actually had this argument a long time ago about it, where to me, you remember I mentioned to you Deleuze, and we mentioned the change, and then I told you the diadalic addition that was with Guattari, where Deleuze was able to use Leibniz and Spinoza as a twofold thing, and his ontology is more of moving between them. It's no longer Spinozian, and it's like it needs Leibniz on the other pole for it to be what it is right now. And so in that way, in that particular way, I went back and I read Leibniz, and I have this way of seeing his philosophy of the world, or of the mathematics, as as the category theory. And instead of assuming that instead of thinking about that we are existing in the best possible world, as if it's that there are bad possibilities and then there is this good one that we exist in. It's rather thinking about it in what Reid have just said, which is the contingency, where things are compatible within the categories of the world that makes every single world the best possible world due to the category theory within it. As you get what I mean, like, because if there are things that are not compatible in Leibniz category theory, then the whole world wouldn't exist, because the existence of it is particularly is based that all the parts of it are compatible within one category for the world to be a world. Yeah.
That
So
makes
I'll be
sense.
really interested.
How do you solve the problem though, wherein we're kind
right
of
now, I'm not going to interrupt completely, but I do want to say, at this point, I'm going to let YouTube go free. Because at this point we are going to end up having another half hour, and it ain't about Klossowski at this point. So
True.
I want to be fair. I just want to be fair to everyone. So give me 2 seconds to sort of figure out, is there anyone I want to send anyone to? I don't think so. I don't think anyone's live right now. Is anyone fucking live right now? I'm going to send you all to Peppa Pig. You can watch children's cartoons. That'll be how we end the day. I always want to say thank you all for joining. If you want to join us live and actually join in on these conversations and meet lovely people like Kent, Afnan, and Reid, and talk through these very complex things when I'm not the person who has to mediate, you can just join us live right here and annoy them live. They don't mind it. Trust me. They're like me. They're sadly always here and always ready to talk. Would love to. Discord.gg/DGQC. If you support what I do, patreon.com/DGQC. And we will see you all